Appeals. Tonight's meeting is going to take place in two parts. The first part will be the public hearings. We will ask the applicant to come up to the podium and give us name and address, and then explain to the board why the relief requested should be granted. Board members will very likely have some questions for the applicant, and then we'll ask anyone in the audience that wants to come up and speak about the application to do the same thing. Come up to the podium and give us name and address, and then talk about the application. After the public hearings are adjourned, we'll take a brief recess, and we will reconvene in the back of the room to deliberate on tonight's applications and to take care of any other tabled items or unfinished business the board may have. Members of the public are certainly welcome at both the public hearings and the deliberations, although deliberations are times reserved generally for conversation amongst board members with staff, sometimes with our council, which, by the way, I do want to point out that today is the 29th birthday of our learned counsel, Pete Weishour, so a little round of applause for Pete's 29th birthday. Very good. You can show the kids that later on there, Pete. But in any event, I point out every month that the town follows a good practice and policy of notifying neighbors in the area of applications through many means, that the applications are going to be heard, and we do that so that people are more fully informed of their rights to come in and speak about the applications. And having said that, I'd ask everyone to rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you, folks. Harold, may we have the first application, please?
Yes. Application number 1, Jonathan Morris, AIA-Carmina Wood and Morris, PC, 486 Main Street, Buffalo, New York, 14203, on behalf of Vision, Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, and Ram, requests the Zoning Board of Appeals rescinds condition number 8 of the resolution dated November 16th, 1995, and condition number 11 of the resolution dated November 27th, 1984, and a special permit for signage under Article 7-7-3 from Article 7-13-C of the Code to allow more than one building-mounted sign at 920 Panorama Trail South. The property is owned by 920 Panorama Trail South LLC and is zoned GB. This is SBL number 139.09-1-60.21. This is application number 13Z-0002.
Thank you. My name is Jonathan Morris. I'm a partner in Carmina Wood Morris. We're the architects working with the Vision Automotive Group on their property at 920 Panorama Trail. We've been at this for a while. Back in 2008, we were working with Vision to upgrade their facilities. At the time, Chrysler had expanded and purchased Jeep and was under ownership by Daimler Chrysler, and there was a nationwide initiative to upgrade all of the dealerships to a corporate image, which you've seen, I'm sure, in some places. There's another dealership, I think in Henrietta, that has a similar sort of look to their building. We came at that point and proposed to take down the existing showroom that was part of Panorama Dodge when it was built back in the mid-'80s, and replace it with a new, larger showroom that met all of Chrysler's requirements. That we were working through that process with the planning board. We were scheduled to come to zoning when Chrysler went bankrupt and all the funding for projects were pulled. And that everything came to a halt. When Chrysler came out of their bankruptcy and is solvent again now, they've gone back to their dealers and are again asking dealerships to upgrade their facilities. So we came back and resubmitted the project last year, but we've made some changes from what was originally submitted. At the time when we started up again, we submitted the original proposal again to pick up where we left off. Since then, we've had meetings here at the town hall with the planning department and with the zoning department, and have spent some time working with the owner to see if there's another opportunity here because of the restrictive covenant that was put on the property back in '84 when it was first built. that there should be no expansion of the facility. Then in '95, when additional land was purchased and the pavement was expanded for more vehicle storage and display, that site plan was approved, I believe, in '95, and that same restrictive covenant was carried over from the zoning board to again say that there should be no expansion of the facilities. So what we're here tonight to talk about is the revised submission, which we copied the zoning board recently. What I've handed you tonight is some renderings and some site plan showing what we're proposing. What we've decided to do, the owners of Vision Automotive Group have a couple other facilities, and they are working on purchasing another building. The plan is to take some of the program components of their dealership off-site. They had a number of people that worked in the office area doing administrative work. They are consolidating those administrative functions from a number of their dealerships in one location off-site in another building. So that reduces the number of employees and reduces the amount of square footage we needed housed in this dealership for administrative functions. There will be one cashier, and there will be the 3 service write-up people who will take care of all the transactions that happen on-site. Everything else, like title searches and all those sorts of things, happen off-site now because of technology. We can do that fairly easily. So they've removed a large portion of the program that was in the original planning documents from the site. They've also reduced the amount of part storage they need because they're storing large parts off-site in some of their other facilities. So we've been able to downsize the program requirements, and we've been working through this with Chrysler as well because they have to sign off on everything that we propose. So the new plan, instead of taking down that existing 1984 showroom, the plans now are to keep that in place and do an interior reconfiguration of the existing building. The service garage out back stays intact pretty much. We are moving the service write-up area from the back out to the front of the building so it's more easily accessible to customers coming in and dropping off their cars. We're going to gut the showroom space and back into a portion of that service area to create an interior showroom for the vehicles, and with the administrative functions moved off-site, we've been able to reconfigure the building to accommodate the new program, the newly defined program, without taking down that building. There is an outdoor display area that they usually have 2 or 3 vehicles on a concrete pad that's just to the right of the showroom structure that you can see in the aerial photograph. And that area will remain. We've got 2 proposals here in the renderings that you see. The one rendering, this is view number 2, shows that outdoor pad area staying, but we're proposing just to build a fascia structure, a freestanding structure around that to help create this appearance of the building that is part of Chrysler's requirements. The look that they're trying to standardize on all their dealerships is a linear facade with the brand signs on it with the center arch. What they're calling their millennial arch. And you've probably, as I said, you've probably seen this look on Chrysler dealerships across the country. I know there's another one here in Rochester. But this is what Chrysler's asking for. By not expanding the building, we are proposing just to build that freestanding fascia out there to get the look that they're asking for without enclosing any more space. We've been to Planning Board back in February 12th and discussed the project with them as well. They've given us a number of comments, one of which is that they're waiting knowing that they were coming here tonight, waiting for some direction from zoning because of the restrictive covenant that was put on the project from zoning. at that time, we talked about the possibility of, instead of leaving that an outdoor display area, actually enclosing that display area with some new curtain wall and increasing the size of the showroom. Chrysler would like us to do that because the showroom they have is pretty tiny. And there are 4 brands that that vision is now carrying, which is the same for all of Chrysler's dealerships across the country. They have Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, those 4 vehicle lines. So we really, they would like us to have more display space undercover. So the rendering 2A that you have shows what that would look like if we took that same display area, which has cars parked on the outside, and put a roof over it and walled it in and put those cars inside the building. And technically, I think, as I'm reading the restrictions on the property, that constitutes an expansion of the facilities. It's space that's currently parked with cars, and it would continue to be a space currently parked with cars. So we're not increasing the capacity of the site or the number of cars parked. It's just whether they're inside or outside. And planning encouraged us to talk to you about that tonight and request that. I think planning seemed amenable to that, and they were very positive about the fact that we weren't taking down the showroom and building the larger facility that we had originally proposed. The site plan that you see up here on the board and you have in front of you is the site plan that we've presented to Planning Board, which redefines and redistributes parking spaces around the site. There are, I understand, in '95, the site plan that was approved then showed 194, I think, parking spaces, something like that. As the site has been used over time, and you can see the aerial photograph we gave you, there's a lot of cars packed onto that site, 2 and 3 deep in some places. We've counted up to upwards of 280 cars on the site at times, and everyone acknowledges that's too many cars on the site. What the owners and with our office have worked towards is defining and reestablishing a set number of spaces on the site that we will stripe, and defined 206 parking spaces in the site plan that you see in front of you. And part of that is including a marked fire access lane that will be striped and marked with pavement parkings as a fire access lane, no parking. And then there's a number of places that the review committee for the town, including the fire marshal, has asked for no parking signs, which we're showing on the site. All of that's been submitted to planning. So our proposal is to redefine this site in this configuration and ask for an approval for 206 parking spaces, as you see configured on the site in this rendering. The other minor modification to the site plan that currently exists, in the aerial photograph, you see in this corner right here, there's a large concrete sort of triangular pad. There's a flagpole on that. What we're asking for is just beyond that, between that island and the building, there's currently 5 parking spaces. We are asking for a reconfiguration of that island to allow for 8 spots in that current location, and those would be striped in a different color and signed and designated as service customer drop-off parking. Chrysler would like us to build a drive-in service drop-off area. We can't do that on this site. There's just not enough room, and that would inhibit the fire access lane and some of the other issues. What we've negotiated with Chrysler is to dedicate those 8 spots so people coming in to drop off their car for service would come in the driveway and park in those 8 spots. The service entrance is right at the end of that line of parking, the relocated service entrance, and the dealership will have porters that'll come out, take the keys, and move the cars from those spots and queue them up either into the garage or back into the service parking stalls you see in the back, to try to limit the traffic of service customers coming in and out of the site and keeping that all in the front of the property rather than the current service entrance, which is around back in the side of the that large service structure in the back. So that is the other modification to the site plan that we're asking for. But those spots are included in the total 206. The last thing that we're here to talk to you about is the signage. As you can see on the renderings, this standardized look, the appearance that Chrysler is asking all their dealerships to comply with. There's the name of the dealership on the Millennial Arch in the middle, and then the 4 brand signs on that fascia. So we've got that horizontal fascia that we're proposing that would have the 4 brand signs on it, and our interpretation of the zoning ordinance for signage saying that the building can have, each business can have 1 building mounted sign, thinking that this is 5 signs instead of 1, we're requesting a variance to allow that. The sign sheet that I gave you in here as well, that has all the dimensions of the signage, I just would like to note that this is a revision of the initial submission. When we were taking down the existing showroom and building the new larger building, we had larger signs. That was a taller building with a taller fascia, and they were quite a bit larger. Keeping this existing building and downsizing the fascia, the actual sizes of the signs have gotten smaller, so in proportion with the building. So we're here to discuss this and answer any questions or concerns you might have.
Okay, I got a kind of a definitional question to start with. The advertisement for this talks about rescinding the restrictions that we had in the other 2 approvals.
Okay.
Aren't you really asking us to approve this particular site plan? I mean, that's a planning board function. I guess what I'm getting at, are you asking us to not to put a similar restriction on this particular application, assuming we approve it?
Yeah, planning has to, in my understanding, planning has to approve the site plan. They got to the point where we got close to that point when we discovered this restriction that was placed by the zoning board. They said, you've got to go to zoning and talk to them about that restriction. Whether that is lifted or whether it is, like you did in 95, you approved the new site plan, kept the restriction on there for future expansions on this new site plan. I think either one would be acceptable to us.
I think the difference is basically to make sure that essentially if you wanted to do what you're doing now, you'd have to come before us so we would get another look at it.
Right.
So it would submit that that's probably the tack that I would propose to the board. So, but you don't have a problem with that?
I don't have a problem either one. We'd like, this is a viable business in Penfield. They've been here a long time. They want to stay in this location. But if you've been in that building, you know the condition of it, and it's been that way since 1984. It's time for, it's long overdue for a facelift, and they certainly want to improve the property. And what we've come up with, we believe will service their needs and improve the property. But we would like to comply with what Chrysler's asking us to do, and there's been a lot of back and forth with them, and I think we're reaching a middle ground here that I'm hoping everyone can agree to.
All right, our staff has told us that basically on this aerial photo that you submitted,
Yeah.
I believe it's this, when they counted the cars, there was like 260 cars parked there.
Yeah.
Assuming we approve the 206, what are you going to do with your, in a similar situation with the remaining cars? How are they going to handle
Well,
it?
part of that, for instance, in this, and we should relabel this, in this original plan, we're showing employee parking of 31 stalls. With this change, there's a number of employees that will no longer be here. That employee parking component drops probably down to about 18 to 20 employees that may be here at any one time. The owners have a lease agreement, and I couldn't get it today in time for today's meeting, but there's a lease agreement with a property owner in East Rochester They are leasing a parking facility there that they can store up to 75 cars, I believe it is. And we are getting that document, and we'll submit it to planning. So we have proof of that. But so what they're doing now is storing, because Chrysler, wants them to. Chrysler requirements say you need to be able to accommodate a couple hundred, 300 cars in this dealership. We obviously can't do that, and Chrysler knows that. So, and they have accepted that lease agreement for these 75 spaces off-site to supplement what we're showing here, and are willing to accept that 206 plus the 75, 281 as the parking capacity, the storage capacity of this site.
So you wouldn't have a problem with us making that a condition of any approval
No.
that we...
No.
Okay. There's currently more than one building-mounted sign on the building. Do you know when those went up?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay. You're asking us basically for 5 building-mounted signs. The code allows 1. We've been pretty consistent over the years with allowing additional building-mounted signs if applicants were willing to forego freestanding signs.
Okay.
Particularly in this situation where you have a large expansive building with signage on, given the closeness to the road, would you be willing to consider taking down that freestanding sign as a condition?
I would have to ask the owners about that. The flag sign that's out there, it's a relatively new sign that was put up when the dealership expanded to all four brands. And I would have to talk. I would imagine Chrysler would probably say they would rather have the flag sign out front than the building-mounted signs. But I'm not sure how they would respond to that. They obviously would like both, but.
Right. But if they had a choice, you think they might go with the flag sign?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know.
I mean, just from a visual impact point of view, it seemed like the building-mounted
Yeah,
ones would.
it may be. That's an interesting question. I'd have to ask Chrysler which they would, if that was a condition of the approval, which they would prefer. If you could say it's one or the other and let them choose. I guess I would have to put that question to them.
And basically, the signs that you're proposing are similar to what you've shown us individually here?
Yeah, they're what's shown on the rendering, and then the specific dimensions of those are shown in that on that sheet. But how they would look on the building is what you see in the renderings. And I guess, well, I should point out that the other one is the service entrance sign. So I guess there are actually 6, including the Vision name.
Okay. Other questions?
Carol?
The only one question I would have is, how are the people who are coming to drop off their cars going to know that those spaces, those 8 spaces, are for them to drop off the cars and that someone will take the cars?
Well, that's the reason for the service sign coming in from the driveway. This sign here points them to service. We've got the new service entrance right here, which, and then there will be some pole-mounted signs at those parking spaces that are saying reserved for service drop-off only. And I imagine at the beginning of the institution of this, the porters will be there. The busiest times are usually in the morning when people are dropping off. The busiest days are usually Monday and Tuesday, and then on Saturdays. So, they're going to have to, and we're moving the service right up front, right underneath that service sign, with windows out there so people can, the service right up folks can see that. So we're hoping that by putting it right there as you drive in, we're hoping it's pretty apparent. But we'll have some pole-mounted signs at those parking spaces as well.
And probably when they make the appointments,
Yeah.
somebody could tell them that
Right.
this has been changed.
Right. And then when the idea is this customers come in and the customer lounge has been moved, so it's right in the showroom area, right off of that service, right up. Customers stay while their cars are being serviced. When they're done, the porter will again bring their car around so they can come out and pick it up at the same location. Or if there's on busy days, the other 4 or 5 spots on the other side of the showroom are available for pickup as well.
Thank you.
Are all the proposed signs for the building, are they all internally lit?
Yes.
Are they currently lit, the signs that are on the building? Or is that something new?
I believe they are, but to be honest with you, I'm not sure. I'm trying to picture what's on the building right now. As many times I've been there, I'm not sure I know.
The first thing I'd like to say is really just to remind you and ask you to remind your clients that we've had compliance issues with this property in the past. And,
Right.
While we certainly like to do what we can to help businesses grow in the community, on occasion we need to remind folks that there are rules, there is a code, and we ask you
Yes.
to follow it, especially when you're coming in and asking for relief from this board and approval from another board. Are you okay then with leaving the language in the resolutions about no expansion?
I'm okay with that, and I think that Dan Edwards, who's the owner of the property, of the business, was out of town and could not make it tonight. I can speak for him. I think he would be all right leaving that language in there. He believes that this new configuration would serve what he needs. Frankly, what Chrysler says they want in terms of this huge facility isn't really necessary for them to sell cars. I mean, especially nowadays, people usually shop online for cars and come in and need to see a vehicle or two and take a test drive. He is thrilled with this new configuration. It's going to save him some money too, rather than tearing down a building and building a new one. And he didn't want to give up, site area either for vehicle parking and circulation. I think if this new plan was approved and that language was kept in the approval, I don't think he would have an issue with that. And I think he understands that this site is limited, and yes, we own property, but it's a steeply inclined wooded hill that we can't use for anything without huge expense.
Well, it just seems to me that you're not expanding anything.
No, we're really not. We're reconfiguring and hoping. We're trying to address the concerns that everyone's had over the number of vehicles that have begun to be put on this lot, and they acknowledge that it's too many and are trying to address that. I know there were concerns a couple years ago about deliveries happening in the street. That the deliveries of vehicles is by an independent contractor who just shows up, and they talked to Chrysler about that, and since 2008, and when we were here before, I know that the vehicle drop-off is now happening on-site, and that delivery out in the street is stopped. There's still issues with cars parking, displaying cars on the grass. We're showing some landscaping and some things around here that will prohibit them from doing that, and they know they're not supposed to be doing that. He acknowledges all those. And that's one of the reasons for redefining and restriping this site plan the way we are, to get rid of the double stacking along the left end of the site, which inhibits the emergency lane, moving that double stacking of new cars down to the right where there's no customer traffic down in that area, and just trying to make a more sensible layout of the site.
I think all those things will address some of the concerns that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
But again, it seems to me, and the board members, other board members who may chime in, or even staff, that you're not asking to expand. So if you're not, then why eliminate that provision? Now,
Well,
if you go to planning board and things change, and they sometimes do, well, that's a different story.
I think the the question was whether going from the last site plan that was approved with 194 or whatever it was, now we're asking for 206. Is that an expansion?
Well, I should say,
No.
excuse me, the expansion of the physical facilities, that's the language.
Right.
I mean, we could leave that intact is what my
Right.
point is. So, but let me ask you about, we seem to be using the terms vehicles and parking spaces interchangeably.
Right.
And I don't know that they are. The provision that you're concerned with says vehicles.
Yes.
But we've been talking more in terms of parking spaces. So I just want to clarify that.
Okay.
Because you could have 200 parking spaces, but 250 cars there if you're putting cars on grass,
Right.
which we don't
you
want
don't
to
want.
have. But just to make it clear, your intent, if there are 206 parking spaces on this lot, your intent is to never have more than 206 cars of all kinds of cars, customers, service, employees, new car,
Right.
used car, visitors of employees, whatever. No more than 206 cars on that lot at any given time.
That's our intention, yeah, and that's what the owner is willing to agree to monitor and enforce, is that 206 vehicles, you know, yes, that's the
I
intention.
say cars, but vehicles is fine.
I guess
Go ahead.
another way of putting that would be, your intent is not to have any parking other than on the striped spaces. 'Cause
Correct.
you could park 6 on the grass and leave 6 spaces open, so.
That's true,
and
too.
still have.
That's well stated
Yeah,
as well.
right, limiting, yeah, vehicles to asphalt areas and what we
Striped
feel
spots,
we
yeah.
can.
Striped spots, yeah.
Right, what we feel we can safely and realistically accommodate on this site is 206 spots
Yeah.
for vehicles on the asphalt.
We can, as long as we
Yeah.
have the same principle in mind, and
Yeah.
I think we do, we can fuss with the language and make sure it's acceptable to all
Sure.
parties. Now, about the signs, how, are there, is each dealership owned independently, or is it one owner with 5 brands? Do you know? And let me tell you the
Again, that's-
reason I ask that.
Yeah.
Because in speaking with Harold before the meeting, and if I'm wrong about this, Harold, you chime in anytime. But if, let's say there were Vision Ram and Vision Dodge and Vision Jeep, each one of those operators would be entitled to a sign. Is that right, Harold?
Right.
So that's why I asked the question. I don't, and it's not, your letter has Vision Dodge / Chrysler / Jeep.
Right.
I don't know exactly what that means, but it would,
That's a question for the owner, but I would love to be able to say, oh yeah, there's 4 different businesses, so
Yeah.
we can get those signs. I think realistically, it's Vision Automotive Group now, and they own a number of different dealerships. I don't think they're all independent businesses, but I don't know. That's a question for the owner I have to ask.
Seems to me we'd have to get into do they share employees? Is there 5 cashiers?
I don't know. The question would start with you, obviously.
I'm sure they share services.
Yeah,
like
they
that.
share-
I'm sure a mechanic may work on a Dodge in the morning and a Chrysler in the afternoon and a Jeep in the evening. And I'm sure they're going to be cross-trained like that.
So what does that mean in terms of your initial ruling on to whether or not they're allowed individual signs? Because obviously,
I guess
unless you make an adverse ruling, we don't see the
My experiences are
case.
that you could see a Dodge dealership independently run from Jeep, Chrysler, or Ram. And then you could see a Dodge and a Chrysler dealership run together along with other dealerships that may be part of that brand market or the group's market, I guess. Because they have other dealerships besides the Chrysler dealership. I think they have Kia.
They have a Kia and I think a Hyundai.
And Hyundai,
yeah.
right. So, I mean, the Vision Group's brands are not limited to the Chrysler product group. It's expanded outside.
Well, so let me ask you, here's what I'm getting at. If there's enough distinction amongst the brands, then this application may be moot. According to you. And again, you're the initial decision maker here. It only comes to us if there's an appeal. So, and I understand your position. You don't have the information that
Yeah.
that would answer the question here, which is fine, because the way we're going here, we may table this anyway to work on some language. But I think that would be good to have that information, and it might be very
Yeah, I'll
helpful
ask.
to you. And it may be separation of duties. My experience with auto dealers is you have a salesman that sells one particular brand, Toyota, but not Kia, even though they're both there. Now, the mechanics may work on both, so maybe and I would imagine it's a matter of
Right.
how distinct are they?
Isn't Harold in essence already made that decision though, by the fact that he's requiring them to come before this board for a variance?
I would think so, but in our work session before this, he said, hey, if they were separate businesses, they each would have, and I don't know, I should just ask you.
But I do think that because they're showing an independent vision sign, that sign, independent of the different brands, Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Mopar,
Sure.
which is the service component of the business, and Ram. Vision is that one sign that I believe is the extra sign that isn't going to comply with the code.
Okay. And again, it just seems like there's some information lacking, and it's not Harold's job or our job to track it down, but we do ask the questions, and if that information, it could possibly
Right.
render this moot. Pardon me?
I thought of a question.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
That off-site East Rochester parking that you mentioned, or that we've got in our packet, is that just for the office staff that's moving over there? Or is this for if you get an overload of new cars that you could park them over there?
My understanding is the property in East Rochester is an open lot. It's a storage lot for vehicles. The office staff is actually moving into another one of their dealership buildings. I think it's actually a building down the road. Or there's another building they're in the process of purchasing now where he hopes to consolidate all of the office functions from, I think, Kia and Hyundai and this facility, and create a central CDC, it's called, or CBC, a business center, where all that stuff happens. Again, it's economy of scale. That same group of people does the same thing for all the other dealerships. Instead of duplicating all those employees, they can consolidate. So that's happening more and more with these companies that own multiple dealerships. So he has space for them elsewhere. That took a huge chunk of real estate out of the picture at this building by doing that.
Could we find out how many vehicles could be parked over there?
Sure. I think the number was 75, but I think that's what it was. I can find out.
We'd probably like something in writing on that.
Yeah, right.
Mike had asked you earlier about the, flag sign is what you were calling it, and the
Right.
building-mounted signs, and certainly what he said is consistent with what this board has done. You mentioned in your papers about other dealerships in the area. Can you describe those for me?
I should have. I can't.
Well, maybe we can ask Gerald if you don't mind. I mean, what do Dick Ide, for instance, what do they have? I just don't know.
There's another.
I took a look.
Go ahead.
Dick Ide has the big Honda thing to cover, it's like a canopy.
Big H or whatever it is.
Lit
Yeah.
up.
Right.
And then it says Honda and Dick Ide on either side of that in the front.
Okay.
Each of the sides say Dick Ide and Honda in two spots, or the side on the right facing the expressway. The other side says Service Delivery Center on one side and Service on another side.
Okay.
So there's a
So
bunch
that,
of
but there's only one brand.
Yeah, it's all
Right.
Honda.
There's only Honda, and they don't have a freestanding sign.
There,
In fact, they applied for one and we
Some years
denied
ago,
them,
yeah.
yeah.
there is another dealership. I think they're in Henrietta. I think his name begins with an H. I should have looked this up. But there is another Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Ram dealership in the Rochester area that has built this kind of a facility. Is it Cortez? Okay. And they have this look with the brand signs and the Cortez and the over the arch.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions on the board? Anyone in the audience care to speak about this? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Application number 2, Gerald Cardinale-Rite of New York, 2172 Penfield Road, Penfield, New York, 14526. request a special permit for outside storage and display under Article 4-4-24 of the code to allow a storage container at 2172 Penfield Road. The property is owned by Penfield Development Associates LLC and is Zone GB. This is SBL number 140.05-1-2. This is application number 13Z-0003.
Thank you. My name is Jeremy Tillapa. I'm the store manager at that location. We're basically looking back in, I believe it was December, requested temporary placement of a storage container for seasonal merchandise. Since then, we're now requesting permanent placement for a storage trailer based on the fact that our store is going to be sometime this year being remodeled on the interior. Aisles will be relayed out. The aisles will be lowered to give a lower profile to the store. With doing such, presently all of our residual merchandise doesn't fit on the shelf, or what we call overstock. We place on riser shelves. Once we get remodeled, we will not have that. We'll have the lower profile. We will not have that ability to use risers and store our residual product on the sales floor on those risers. And our back room is very tiny. It's probably approximately maybe 12 by 12, 14 by 14, very small for a retail store actually. So what we're requesting is that that trailer that was temporary be permanent, and we use that for storing non-perishable items would be stored out there, and our perishables would be stored in the back room. Other than that, the trailer, it's actually still there presently. If you look at it, it's a smaller trailer version. It only takes up one parking spot. It's offset on the 250 side of the road. It's offset on the far left of the building. And it's backed up right to I guess you'd call it a curbing, the flower bed area with an overhead light. And we'd like to keep it in that general spot if possible. It's, it's tucked off to the side, so to speak, and prevents, traffic issues within the parking lot and, blind spots. So it's basically just requesting permanent placement of where the current trailer is from temporary to permanent.
I believe we had given permission for it to stay there till January, right, 2014?
I believe it was January 20th or somewhere around that ballpark.
Yeah, it was the middle of January sometime.
And then I know our corporate office has been working with someone, I'm not sure who, and they had told our corporate office that it could stay there since we are in the process of seeing if we can get it promote or pushed to a permanent status.
But what year? What year was it?
Next year, 2014.
Right. That's
The remodel?
No, the trailer, we had given permission for it to be there for all of this year till January next year.
Oh, okay. We were under the understanding that it was from September to January, and then from September to January.
No, I think it was for the whole time because you had asked.
Right.
Because you said you had seasonal merchandise to store throughout the year
Correct.
for all the seasons.
But
Okay.
that decision the board made was based upon the landlord's, the property owner's letter that said they could have it until January of 2014. That's why we didn't go past that time period.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
because we originally just asked for the Christmas period, because that's when we get the most shipments in, just so that we have that additional storage at the Christmas season. But now we're asking, obviously, because of the remodel and the lower profile that the store is going to be set to, that we will not have any other spot other than our tiny back room to store extra product, and to ensure that our store is properly stocked, and that we really need an additional placement for some type of storage for our extra product.
What do other Rite Aids do? Because they must all have a similar footprint with a small back room.
Actually, they don't.
No?
There's a few years ago, Rite Aid acquired Eckerd's. A lot of the old Eckerd stores, if you see them, seriously, you could probably play football in the back rooms. That's how large they are. We're classified, they have about 20 different classifications on how they do their stores, depending on the year it was constructed. We're classified as what they call an RA1, which is the smallest layout. There are a few scattered throughout Rochester. Probably the next closest RA1 would be over in like Irondequoit, Hudson, I believe it's the corner of Hudson and Titus. But a lot of the other ones around the area all have very large back rooms, like our one in Panorama. It has a very large back room, probably as large as this entire room here. And then we also have one in East Rochester, which is probably about half the size of this back room. Give you an idea how small our back room is. You know, from the wall, it may come out to here, and it may come up to the gentleman with the tie there. And that's about all we have for.
I think I have a tie on too, by the way. But I don't know that I'm a
There you
gentleman.
go. Draw your own conclusions.
But it's a very small back room, and you know we got an overhead door there, and we also have a fire escape door, so you can't block that. And then one wall has all electrical panels, so you have to keep stuff away from those.
Well, now that you're requesting to have it permanent, have you thought about doing an expansion to the store or doing something nicer outside as an outside facility?
That would be up to our corporate office, but the way our building is placed on the lot, really the only way they would be able to expand, I think, would be to go up. Because behind the building, all there is a single driveway. That's the exit for our drive-through, pharmacy drive-through. And then the plaza is right behind there, and we don't own any of that. So the only real opportunity would be to go up. I'm not sure if our corporate office is willing to go to that expense or not.
Or where you have even where you're putting the trailer outside, perhaps there's an idea you could work with corporate to have something out there proposed to the planning board.
I know my district manager has spoke with corporate, and they had talked about maybe putting some type of fencing around it to give it a more visual appealing. You know, whether it's like one of those chain link fences with the little plastic slats, or whether it's a wooden fence with, he actually discussed that with our corporate office, you know, building some type of fence and then, you know, putting flower beds around it or something, just to give it a little better cosmetic appeal, so to speak. But honestly, I don't know. I would say 99% of this is all handled at our corporate level. I was just basically asked to come and represent, so I don't honestly know
want
all
the
the
space.
details.
Well, the good news is that you have it for probably longer than you thought, if you have it
Yes.
in January of next year. So
Yeah, that we were not aware of.
I guess that we would suggest you go back and you talk about, see if it's possible at all to do a building expansion.
Okay.
Because it doesn't, to be quite candid, it doesn't look as good as it could. And you could talk about fences and all that, but there is nothing, when you need more space, the best alternative would be to build, assuming that you are able to do that. And certainly should check with your landlord as well. And you have time to do that. And I know I personally would rather see you explore other alternatives than permanent outdoor storage.
Placement infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, you need more room, and that's understandable, but let's see if there's a way to do it without such a
Well, trailers just aren't meant
extraordinary
to be
method, yeah. I mean, yeah. they're-
permanently, it's a temporary solution, so.
Right.
Right.
And what about, I don't know how long your lease is, but there are occasionally many openings of other spaces in that area, either right where you are or across the street in the plaza. Has that been considered, maybe moving to a larger space?
No, our lease is good till 2019. They really, from my understanding, we're not going anywhere anytime soon unless, you know, unfortunately we have a natural disaster or something. I don't really see us going anywhere.
Anything else from the board? Okay, anyone in the audience? Okay, very good, thank you.
All right, thank you.
That's the last public hearing, so the hearings will be adjourned. We will take a brief recess and then reconvene in the back of the room. Thank everyone very much.